This is Dr. Karen, and you are listening to the De Facto Leaders Podcast on the B Podcast Network, where I share up-to-date, evidence-based practices, my own experiences, and guest interviews designed to help pediatric therapists, educators, and aspiring school leaders design services that support social, emotional, and academic growth and set kids up for success in adulthood. Whether you want to learn effective strategies for your therapy session or classroom, be an influential leader on your team, or find creative ways to use your skills to advance in your career, I've got you covered. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Karen, and welcome to episode 228 of the De Facto Leaders Podcast on the B Podcast Network. This is part 3 of a 5-part episode series on the 5 executive functioning skills that can inform your executive functioning framework. This is also the first stage of me making some slight changes to how I handle the podcast. So I will be shifting to more shorter solo episodes this year. I will still be publishing some longer episodes as well as guest interviews as opportunities present themselves. So if you know great guests, if you're interested in being a guest, or if you're interested in doing a podcast swap with me, if we want to be on each other's podcasts or platforms or something like that, definitely reach out to me at talktome@drkarenspeech.com. But you will be seeing some shorter episodes just to really pull out some of the important concepts that I have covered in my content over the last 10 years. I have a lot of content out there, and I have people tell me they're still going through their queue of episodes. So I want to make sure that I keep this bite-sized and manageable for you, and also pull out some of the great tidbits that I've learned as I've chatted with amazing guests over the years. So, getting to the topic of the day, which is the third of 5 executive functioning skills that can inform your executive functioning framework. I like to organize executive functioning into a 5-skill framework because when we think of all the different skills that we could categorize as executive functioning skills, things like ideational fluency, situational awareness, the ability to take the perspective of another person, working memory, all of those types of things. It can be difficult to figure out how you actually teach those things. And I have found that if you organize them into tangible skills, it can actually give people an idea of how they might teach these skills in a way that actually results in generalization. So today we are talking about future pacing. In episode 226, we talked about time perception. 227, we talked about self-talk. And now we'll get into future pacing or future thinking. So I like to say future pacing because when I think about thinking into the future, what we need to do in order to think ahead into the future and then act accordingly based on what we need to be doing, what does our future self want to be doing, what do they want to accomplish, we have to be able to pace or adjust the behavior that we're doing right now. And I like the word pacing. Maybe it's just a bias because I have an interest in endurance sports, but that word pacing definitely, there's a lot of great sports analogies that you can apply here. So I'll give an example. When I was younger, I was a swimmer. So obviously pacing is really important when you're a swimmer. So that was, I started swimming when I was 8. I think when I started doing competitive swim team in the summer, did that all the way through till I was 18, and then also swam in high school. So obviously pacing is a challenge. It's especially challenging when you do not have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. So I found that at a very young age, I was very aware of time. I paid attention to time, but many kids who are struggling with executive functioning might not be thinking about time, might not be thinking about how what they need to be doing in 5 minutes, in an hour, or tomorrow, and thinking about what behavior should I be doing now? What things do I need to do in order to plan and prepare? And I love to use the concept of a race as an analogy for future thinking skills. One thing, so when I was, gosh, it was actually in grad school, I started getting really into running. I always did a little bit of running for my swim training, but I didn't actually start taking it seriously until I was getting my graduate degree in speech pathology. My sisters decided that they wanted to run the Chicago Marathon, and I was kind of like, well, if you guys can do it, I can do it. So I really got into running then. Did run the marathon, have not run a marathon since then. That was back in, I believe, 2004, if I remember correctly. But I did get into running some shorter distances after that. And I spent a fair amount of time in my early 30s actually competing, doing 5Ks. And, if you have ever run a 5K before, obviously there are people who take it really seriously. There are people who are just kind of there to have a good time and get some exercise and promote a good cause and all those kinds of things. But when I was in my 30s, I was on a racing team. I was doing quite a bit of training. And the interesting thing is that there would be a lot of high school kids that would show up to races. They'd be coming off of their cross country season, and they'd want to take the opportunity to run in a local race, get some additional training in, and all of those good things. What I found was so interesting, and this was back when I was fast and I could be competitive. We would all line up on the starting line, and some people liked to get right up to the front. I did like to kind of get towards the front because you don't want to be, getting trampled and you don't want to get caught behind somebody. However, I noticed that the high school kids, especially the high school boys, would just take off. And, this is a 5K, so little over 3 miles, and would just go so fast, especially that first quarter mile, that first mile. And I remember, and again, I'm an adult at this time. I have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, and I'm thinking to myself, they're not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to keep that pace up. And if they can, good for them. But more often than not, I would find that I would end up passing many of them, if not by the first mile mark, usually around the 2 mile mark. They don't necessarily know yet how to project what they should be doing that first quarter mile, that first mile, to know what their mile three self would want them to be doing. And so a lot of them would not necessarily be able to keep up that pace. Well, what does it take in order to be good at pacing in a 5K or in your life? Well, you have to have a lot of experience. As someone who used to be pretty good at pacing, I'll be honest, I'm not in my 5K shape right now as I'm recording this, but back in the day when I was pretty good at pacing myself during a 5K and I could keep up at a competitive pace, or at least what was a competitive pace for me, I knew what I should be doing in that first mile in order to be able to maintain it throughout the second and third mile. So I had a lot of experience doing it, and really what it took was a lot of practice and a lot of, as you're standing there on that starting line, thinking back on that past experience and then applying it to the future, which actually I'm talking a little bit about episodic memory, which is what we're going to talk about in the next episode. But the point being is that I was able to take my past experiences and knowledge and think in that moment about what I needed to be doing in that moment in order to plan what I needed to do in the future, which in this context is what do I need to be doing in the first quarter mile of that race to be able to do what I would like to be doing in the last mile in order to get to that finish line, to get to that goal time. So that's why I like the word pacing. There are many times when in our lives, we might be thinking about what we want to accomplish later on in the evening. We have a big project coming up and we have to pace ourselves. We have to think about, all right, what is my end goal? What are the steps I need to take in order to get there? And what are the actions that I need to take in order to get to be doing what I need to be doing right now and to be able to execute? How do I pace myself? How many and I can think about for some of these long-term projects that I have, how many tasks do I need to check off my list this week in order to get enough done that I will have enough time next week to do those tasks? And that can be very difficult. So that's why I like to use the word pacing. It's almost synonymous with future thinking, but not exactly. It goes along with things like working memory, but not exactly the same because many times with things like working memory, you're taking in incoming information, you're having to use that incoming information to make a decision, but it's not exactly the same as thinking into the future. They're really two different skills that go together. So, what does this mean as far as how we teach executive functioning skills? Well, this is something that I outline in my time journal strategy. So, I really get into future thinking, future pacing skills for some of those multi step tasks, where essentially what you need to be able to do is outline a strategy for kids to be able to think about time perception. So thinking about how long something will take, to be able to use self-talk in order to engage in that strategic planning and gather all of your materials and your supports that you might need. So, for example, if you have a student who's using time perception, their self-talk should support that time perception and that they should be talking to themselves about what are my materials that I need. So they might, need to remember that they need to get their clock or their calendar. And then they might be using self-talk to actually remind themselves to use that visual or that clock or that calendar. And essentially, we're using those skills to engage in that future pacing. And really, when we're actually working on future pacing, we're doing it simultaneously with work on time perception and self-talk. But it's important to talk about future pacing separately because essentially what you have to do is give some additional context to how we might work on time perception and self-talk. So, for example, if you're working on future pacing, essentially you need to have some kind of tangible task that to give you some kind of an end goal. For example, completing a writing assignment, cleaning a room, making a meal, getting your things together. So you need some kind of a task, and that can help you engage in that future pacing. So what is our end goal? Well, in my 5K example, it's to be able to run 3.1 miles in a certain time period. It's to get to that finish line essentially. But if your goal is to have your things ready to go on time before the school bell rings, well, you'd want to think about that starting line as whenever you need to start getting ready. Well, if you wait too long before you actually start getting your things ready, then you're not going to get to the finish line in time, meaning you're not going to have your items in your bag and be ready to go when that bell rings. The other thing that you might think about is that if you rush through the activity, that will result in potential issues as well. So if you rush through something, you might have to end up redoing it, and that might set you back a little bit. So all of those things are going to be important in that future pacing, future thinking about what's the end goal? What do I need to get done? And then what kinds of things do I need to consider along the way? What kind of risks do I need to mitigate? With the 5K example, a risk you might mitigate is if I run too fast in the first mile, I'm going to be tired and feeling awful in that third mile, and I might not finish. I might have to walk and, all of those types of things. I'll probably not reach my goal. Whereas if it's something like um, getting your things together at the end of the day, one of the risks that you might mitigate is if I rush through this, then I might miss something and I might end up leaving something at school and then I'm going to miss my assignment. Or if I wait too long to get ready and don't give myself enough time, I might not have enough time to get all of my things together. I might be late for the bus. So there could be other things that could come up. So essentially, that's what we want to be working on when we're thinking about future pacing. Now, I do teach a specific protocol for working on time perception, self-talk, and future pacing in the School of Clinical Leadership. And if you want to get a taste of how to do that and get an overview and get a chance to listen to me do a deep dive on all 5 of these executive functioning skills, then I invite you to join me in a free live virtual event that Parallel Learning is hosting, where I will be the guest speaker. This event is happening on August 14th, 2025 from 6:30 p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. So if you are interested in getting some free CEUs, if you want to learn more about parallel learning and hang out with some other great clinicians, then I invite you to join us. Parallel Learning is a company that has a lot of great remote SLP opportunities. So if you are in the market for a new position, or if you're just interested in learning more about opportunities out there, you'll definitely want to check them out. And on this live event, I will be doing a presentation called Executive Functioning Beyond Checklists and Planners, where I will be going through these 5 executive functioning skills, and we'll also be walking through a protocol you can use to support them. I will also be talking about how you can take the first step in really being that executive functioning leader on your school team. So if you're interested in attending that event, then check out the show notes. Again, that's August 14th at 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's a collaboration between me and Parallel Learning, hosted by Parallel Learning. Also, if you are interested in putting an executive functioning implementation plan in place for your school team, if you want to not just learn how you can support students you're working with directly, but you also want to get buy-in from your team and really see this support embedded across your school team, because you know that that's so important for generalization to happen, then check out my free training on how to put an executive functioning implementation plan in place on your school team. You can learn more about that training at drkarendudek-brannan.com/EF leadership. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, leave me a rating or review, share it with your friends, and I will see you next time.